Yo, 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 what is up, everybody? Back for another episode of the What Now podcast. Today, it's not just me, but there's no Dr. Spencer. I am co hosting, and we are joined today by none other than Dr. Becky Allen. I'm super excited to have her on. For those that may not know, Dr. Becky is the founder and owner of Genesis PT and Wellness, which is a huge physical therapy, I don't even want to say clinic, but organization all over the Metroplex here in Texas. I'm super, super pumped to have her on, hear her story, talk about PT and Chiro Collab, and just all the things scaling. So, Dr. Becky, welcome to the show.
Yay! Thanks so much for inviting me on. I'm really excited to talk about all the things.
Awesome. So, without really, diving into too much, but give the listeners the background. What should they know about Dr. Becky?
So like you said, I am the founder of Genesis PT and Wellness. I launched the one clinic that it started at back in the fall of 2019. I've just had, one room inside a wellness clinic of midwifery, chiropractic, lactation, massage, and then I was the physical therapy, so specifically pelvic floor. And so since then, Genesis has kind of exploded across, like you said, the DFW Metroplex. Fun fact, we also just opened last fall in Colorado. So we have a clinic in Denver now.
Super cool.
And we specialize in pelvic health. We treat men, women, children all across lifespan for all sorts of pelvic floor dysfunction. A lot of people think that pelvic floor physical therapy is like, the pregnant moms and the moms who leak. And I'm like, it is. And everyone has a pelvis, which means everyone can have pelvic floor dysfunction. And so we strive to really elevate the way that pelvic floor therapy is understood, both to the patient, client, but also other practitioners, because so many people think, oh, that's just, doing Kegel exercises, isn't it? And in fact, it's quite the opposite of that. And so that's one big goal is we're really out there to kind of change the game of how pelvic floor therapy is understood, how it's utilized, how it's practiced. And we really just want to be a really great resource, both for education and changing people's lives in DFW and now Denver, Colorado. So that way they can really get their life back. So many people who struggle with pelvic floor dysfunction simply don't realize it's something they don't have to deal with. And we love just blowing their minds and explaining that, yeah, we totally can fix this. And you absolutely can live a life without peeing your pants, without chronic low back and hip pain, without feeling like your organs are falling out. There's so many, sky's the limit for what we can do. And so we're really just out here to change the game of pelvic health. And it's been a wild ride.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And with that, I don't really know much about pelvic floor PT. I visited the Fort Worth location, had a great session with Dr. Megan. But when it comes to pelvic floor PT and then just kind of the birth of it, is it something that's newer? Just as is that a dumb question? I don't know.
No dumb questions. Love the birth little pun in there. I don't know if that was intended, but we love it.
It wasn't, but we'll take it.
We'll take it. So it's not necessarily new. However, I tell people over the past 5 to 7 years, I feel like pelvic floor PT has been having a moment, if you will. It's like, I don't know what it was about the pandemic or whatever, but I think just social media use ramped up a ton. And a lot of us pelvic PTs were on there educating already. And so then more people were seeing our stuff. And so it feels like, it's this new up and coming thing. It's actually not. It's been in the field of physical and occupational therapy for decades. Now, I do want to say it seems like the past few years or so, there's kind of this movement happening of it's not Kegel exercises. This is not a passive, just come and quote, get worked on. It's the patient is a very active participant. They're learning a lot. They're implementing a lot of lifestyle changes. They're doing our exercises. We are doing manual therapy, and it's just so much more than Kegel exercises. And that's kind of probably what you're feeling is this movement towards, it's not what it has been in the past, if that makes sense.
100%. And so with that, obviously you talked about social media and everything. When you were going through PT school, were you like, I'm going to be a pelvic floor PT? What did that process?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let me just tell you about PT school, okay? The whole goal of PT school is to create entry level PTs that can be entry level and safe in any, normal type of PT field. So we can be outpatient, we can be in a hospital and nursing home. And, when we get there, we can be safe and we know kind of what to do, but we're going to have to keep learning as we go. Right. So that's kind of the goal of PT school, is to produce these like safe entry level PTs. So then you have various niche specialties that you can go into. Not everyone does. You don't have to, but you can. So for me in PT school, we had one lecture that was niche practices, and we covered all the niche practices in the 1 2 hour lecture. So I got maybe 15 minutes of what pelvic floor physical therapy was, and they kind of made fun of it. They were kind of like, these crazy people go into orifices of the body and adjust things like the coccyx internally. And we're all like gasping in the audience. We're like, oh my gosh, I would never. That's so crazy. Why would I want to do that? So that was my first taste of pelvic floor PT. And I was literally like, I will never.
Mm-hmm.
And so fast forward, graduate, get a job, become a mom again. And it was my second pregnancy there, where my midwife at the time was, she's the one that had the wellness center that had kind of the multiple provider types. And she was just on me all pregnant. She's like, I know you're a physical therapist. I need a pelvic floor physical therapist. Why don't you just go learn it and come back and be my pelvic floor physical therapist? And I'm just like, no, I'm not going to do that, because I had this taste in my mind. So fast forward, she berates me all pregnancy, not really, but she just doesn't let it go. And fast forward to my postpartum visits with her, I left one of them and came home and checked my email, and my alma mater, which was Texas Women's University, Dallas, that's where I went to PT school, had sent us an email. They were taking applications for it's a mouthful, their post-professional certificate program in women's health physical therapy, which includes pelvic floor. And so I was like, what is this? What is this? So I just kind of like looked more into it, and it just kind of, something was just nagging at me. And so I requested more info, and I ended up applying and thinking, well, they only take 10. I'm not going to get in. And then I get in and I'm just like, crapola. And so I have to decide, am I going to try this or not? And the professor told me, she was like, why don't you just come? Why don't you just try it? If you don't like it after we take female anatomy, you can stop. I won't charge you for the whole year, because I think she knew I would love it. So that's kind of what happened. I just kind of was sucked into it on accident and ended up literally loving it in the program. And then here we are.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, just if in case physical therapy school is anything like chiropractic school, I'm sure you and your friends, after that one niche lecture, all walked out and each of you told each other, well, I know one thing I'm never going to be is a pelvic floor PT.
Yes. I mean, we were giggling. We were like, who would do this?
And so how far along were you as a physical therapist before you took this class?
Yeah. Okay, let me think. I got to do the math here. It would have been almost 4 years, almost like 3.5 years as a real physical therapist, until I, in my experience in those 3 years was outpatient orthopedics pretty heavily. And then once I had my first kiddo, I was part-time, like at a rehab hospital and a nursing home. So just kind of doing things to get out of the house twice a week, But yeah, that's what I did.
Okay. And so take the class, take the certification.
Mm-hmm.
And then do you start Genesis like right after?
I literally started it during. So
Okay.
My midwife, the gal who I started in her wellness center, she was like, well, once you feel like you know enough, why don't we just go ahead and start you? And I'm like, well, am I an employee? Like, how's it going to work? She's like, no. You just start your own LLC. I'll tell you how to do it. And then you just pay me rent, and then I'll send you patients and you go out and get other patients. And I'm like, she's saying like it's so easy or whatever. And so I'm just over here like, what is happening? And so I do it. I'm like, okay, like open an LLC, sure. And she starts sending me patients, and that's kind of what happened.
Okay. That's incredible. It just nice and easy flow. And so with that, so you've started, patients are starting to come in. When you were going through that certification, was it when you were being taught kind of that pelvic floor style? I know you make the joke, and I'm sure it won't be the last time we hear it on the podcast either. Like, was it, hey, pelvic floor, we're going to do Kegels? When did you start going more of that functional route, taking that approach?
Ooh, I love this question. And you're right, I'll never stop bashing Kegels. So this was an incredible program. It was very holistic. And like I said, this was a women's health program. So we did learn pelvic floor, but we also learned like breast cancer rehabilitation and like about heart health for women and about female athletes. And so, it was more widespread than just the pelvic floor, but we did spend a lot of time on the pelvic floor. There were plenty of instances where we were taught to teach pelvic floor contractions, which is Kegel exercises. They didn't necessarily say, give your patients a Kegel handout and send them home to do Kegels. They were already they were trying to teach us to think critically, but the current research was only ever done on Kegels. So they had to kind of go off of what the research then showed, and the research is still catching up. I mean, you probably know this. It's like research doesn't really show that what we're doing works until 20 years later.
Yeah.
So we had to go off of what the old studies show. But what I was finding was with my patients, as I'm learning this stuff and as I'm treating my patients, I just was like, there's something missing. Like, this cannot be it. I would never just in orthopedics have a patient come in and just learn abdominal bracing if they have back pain and never get up and load them and teach mobility and how to move and functional movement patterns. And I was just like, why? I just couldn't put my finger on it. And there was a time during my program where we had a guest lecturer came for, again, a 2-hour lecture, and she taught us about the foot and how that connects to the pelvis and the hip and the pelvic floor muscles.
100%.
And that truly, her name's Dr. Laurel Prue, that changed my life, because I was like, this freaking is what's missing. Like, this is the vibe. This is what I'm like, I could just feel that was missing in my treatments. And so that is what really opened the door for me to dive down the rabbit hole of, starting with the foot and the kinetic chain. And then, since then I've just gone rogue and I'm like a crazy person with pelvic floor, but that's kind of how it worked.
Gotta be crazy. There's also a lot of probably chiropractors listening that heard you say, research doesn't catch up for another 20 years. As nervous system based chiropractors, we fully understand that.
Yes. Like, listen, evidence-based practice has 3 legs to the stool. It's not just the research. We got to actually use our brains, and we got to actually see what's working for our patient.
Yeah. I mean, anecdotal evidence is plenty, right? Right. And so now you've gone through, you're looking at the foot. I'm sure you have your ultras on or Vivos or whatever. And now you're in your one room. How do you go from your one room to where Genesis is now?
Yes, I blinked and it happened. No, I'm just kidding. But kind of, it feels that way. So I started out, I always say, whenever I started this, I said it was going to be my part-time mom job. I was going to do this, and as long as I had enough patients that basically covered my rent and expenses and I didn't lose money, that's all I needed, because for my mental health as a mom, I was like, I just got to get out of the house a few days a week, okay? And so that's kind of my mentality when it started. But then when those 3 days that I was in clinic were busting at the seams, I ended up adding a Saturday, and then that got full. And then I ended up adding another day. So now I'm treating, 5 full days a week, including a weekend, full. And this is all in a matter of about 4 months, by the way, of launching. And so I'm like, I came to this realization of, holy moly, like, people need this, and people are flocking to Genesis because now I've figured out that I'm taking a different approach than what these other places are doing. Maybe they've been to these other places and only got, 50, 60, 70% better, or got worse or something. I'm like, people need this. So I can either keep growing my wait list or referring people back out to the other places that are not good, right? Yeah. Or I can try this whole hiring thing and just see what happens. And so I did that, and surprise, that was Dr. Corey. And so we didn't have a room at the wellness center I was currently in with the midwife suite. So I found another midwife who had a room that was about 20 minutes into East Dallas, and I put Corey there. And I mean, you've met Corey. I was lucky. Like, it was just divine intervention, to be honest, of like her and my paths crossing at this time, because she was a new grad, new to pelvic floor, and came in during like literally summer of 2020. and was
Perfect.
just like, yeah, I'll build a clinic, and did. And I just cannot even believe it. So that's how like the scaling began. And then her and I really, she got full. We realized we have the same decision to make. Do we keep growing? Do we hire again? So that's when she ended up moving to Fort Worth and opening the Fort Worth clinic that you've been to. We hired 2 people there. She worked her booty off to get them full. And so it just kind of in the beginning, I would say in the first 2 years, was we were trying to stay caught up to the demand. And from there, about 2.5 years in, we had established really ourselves across the Metroplex of like, we are the ones for pelvic floor therapy. So then our strategy kind of shifted of like, okay, instead of having to react to growth and grow because we're busting at the seams, how can we actually strategize this and grow because we want to reach more people? We want to actually open in more locations to serve those populations, right? And so it kind of shifted there, but that's how it started.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so you and Corey are trucking along, obviously getting clinics full. Um, Maybe for those listening that, I mean, most people listening are probably a cash-based office, which I know Genesis is as well. Um, what were some of the strategies on top of obviously the connection with the midwife um, that y'all use and continue to use to scale and grow the clinics?
It is so
I know it's a
important.
loaded
And I
question.
learned this in hindsight. It's so important to know what your brand stands for and know the value you're providing to your clients and your patients, right? And so our thing from the beginning has always been, and we've been able to refine this message over time, but it's always been the same of you're at Genesis now. Like, whether you've tried other clinics before, whether you haven't, whether you've tried home programs or whatever, you've tried Kegels because everyone tells you to do that. None of that matters because you're at Genesis now and we actually know how to help you. And I believed that literally from day one, because honestly, I'm the type of person, if I don't know what the heck is happening in the initial evaluation, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to go, they're going to leave my clinic and I'm going to research and I'm going to ask people, I'm going to figure it out. So I believed in myself enough to know that I care enough about providing this exceptional service, and I'm going to figure out how to do that no matter what. And so I was confident enough to take that bold stance of, when no one else can help you, this, like, we can. So just come here, we can help you. And we do it differently, right? And so just knowing what value you provide and kind of the promised outcome that you can give, which is kind of hard in healthcare and wellness, because it's like, you can't necessarily say, I'm going to get you out of back pain in 3 visits or whatever. You can't always promise that. But what we can promise is that we're going to partner with you and you're going to get the best care you've ever gotten, and you're going to see improvement, basically. And so knowing kind of that promise to your ideal client, and then knowing your differentiators, like what are the 2 or 3 things that sets you apart from the quote unquote others. And that is what you just talk about to everyone. You're like, this is what we do for people and this is why we're different. And you're not putting the others down, you're elevating yourself. And it's that just unapologetic alignment to who your brand is, and just never backing down with it, honestly.
That's awesome. And I think people listening might say, well, where did this confidence come from? Was it like after your first pelvic floor patient or client, were you like, all right, this works, we're good to go? Or did that take some time to build as you're still working in that one suite?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, this is kind of a woo-woo answer. I would say the confidence came from, honestly, my life experiences even before Genesis. I've always kind of just been someone to take on a challenge and think, I can do that. I can probably figure that out. And so I kind of grew up doing hard things in general. So I think that's the true answer, is that it's kind of in my innate nature and ability to take on a hard thing and just figure it out along the way. Then if we put that with like my treatment approach, my method or whatever, I mean, I still refine it to this day, right? And so I think it's just this belief that you are doing right by your patients, if you're applying what you know in the moment. You're never going to know everything, and as long as you are as long as you're open to just always learning and always being able to say, I don't know everything right now, but I know this stuff. And I know that I care about you, my patient, and I know that I'm willing to find more answers as we go through your journey. And so I think that it's always kind of a journey with patient care, is like trial and error, like what's working, what's not. And then you hear from patients that are just like, oh my gosh, this is so much different than any other, even if it wasn't pelvic floor, just any other PT in general I've ever been to. Like, no one's ever asked me these detailed of questions. Like, no one cares this much. And I'm like, so you hear those things from patients, it kind of fuels your fire. And then you're already someone who is like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to do it. I can do it. And so the two together, it's like adding gasoline to my
Yeah.
fire already.
Yeah. Just a huge tenacity.
Yeah.
And so kind of that next higher level. So it's great that you have it, and then obviously be able to scale. How are you? I mean, Corey, like you mentioned, she came in right out of school. How do you start to train and kind of educate and inspire the newer pelvic floor PTs?
Oh, this is such a great question too. I love this topic. What I've learned over the years, we've been a business for about 5.5 years now. And what I've learned more recently is that Corey and I are opposites. I am very much a visionary. I see the future. I see, kind of like I was saying, is I see this thing and I'm like, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, let's figure it out along the way. She is more the how person. So she's like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but let's like make a process and a system that will get us there that we can then repeat time and time again. So again, divine intervention, putting her in my life, because I realized that probably, because even in the first few years of Genesis, she wasn't, she was a staff therapist. She wasn't necessarily on leadership. I didn't even have a leadership team at that time, right? She wasn't, on track to become a partner. She is a partner now. So at the time, I was operating very much in both seats of which you have to in the beginning, right? I was in my visionary role, which is where I thrive. And then I also was having to struggle through this,
Do list.
world
Yeah.
and trying to train people and whatever. And so I think what happened was she and I realized she has that skill set and I don't. And I have the skill set to see the big vision and the future and, like light a fire under our team and like get us all rowing in the same direction and things. And she's like, I'm going to take that vision and I'm going to show everyone how to do it. And so the answer is I didn't do it by myself, right? Like I found someone who believed in my vision enough to figure out how to get us there, because when you have such a big dream to change the game of pelvic health care, like that's a big undertaking. And she's like, I'm in, let's figure it out. So the answer is I didn't do it alone.
Yeah. And so she would be the better person to ask of how that training and what that manual and all that looks like.
Oh, yes. Don't ask me about a manual. Don't ask me about a process. No, I'm kind of kidding. But yeah, she is like your go-to operations girly. She's like, I'm looking outward and where are we going? And she's looking inward to the company and running the company. And she's
your integrator.
She is my integrator. Yeah. Have you read Traction?
I'm like halfway through.
Incredible. Yeah. She's the integrator. I'm the visionary. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, we operate on EOS, side note. So
Okay. Tons of questions there. So you guys have now scaled, you've grown. One interesting question. So they're all mainly satellite locations. So is Corey going around from location to location each week training, or does someone come into Fort Worth or to like your main Dallas location and then branching out?
Right. Awesome question. So there's two like main hubs. There's Fort Worth and there's Dallas. Those are our two like what I would say flagship clinics. And then the rest are kind of more satellite in nature. They might be one room, maybe two. We do have a Willow Park location that's new that has capacity to grow into a large one, but it's new. So it still pretty much feels like a satellite one. So in order to do all that, no, Corey does not go around to all the clinics. Her in her integrator seat, if you will, she is kind of in charge of the rest of the leadership team. We have two directors of therapy in DFW. Dr. Kayla manages kind of like what I would say is like the Dallas side, and Dr. Meg manages kind of the Fort Worth side. So Corey kind of looks at Kayla and Meg and kind of pushes through the processes that they then go implement. They're meeting with the staff clinicians and therapists. They're training them on treatment skills, on, just whatever it is to keep the clinics running. So it's very much like, if there's me, the visionary, there's Corey, the integrator. Corey looks at my vision and whatever it is I'm funneling down, she uses the leadership team and our directors to then go forth to the clinic and change the world.
Okay, that's great. And then if I were a patient of Genesis, obviously very different clinicians, is it the same? So if I go to Fort Worth versus, you said Willow Park, or to an Addison location, for those that aren't familiar with DFW, these are just different locations all over. If I were to go to any of those, would it be the same experience in the sense of same intake, same questions, or do you allow that flair from each doctor, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So overall, it's the same. The Genesis way is the Genesis way. The Genesis client experience is the Genesis client experience. The Genesis method of treatment is the same, but our treatment method allows for the treating therapist to use their various skill sets for their various patients. And that's like so vague sounding, but essentially the big picture client experience is identical clinic to clinic. Same intake, same, Fort Worth side has the same admin for those few clinics. Dallas side has an admin for those few clinics. Same process and everything, same fees, same cancellation policies, all of that kind of big picture ops stuff is identical clinic to clinic. Now, a therapist might have various trainings. Like some of my PTs are trained in pessary fitting, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically an assistive device that can be inserted to help with organ support. But not everyone is. And then some of mine are trained in men's pelvic health. Not everyone is. Some are trained in pediatrics. Not everyone is. So we all kind of have our flair of our own treatment, but our admins know if this patient is calling and they're like, I have prolapse and I am a weightlifter, I have to get back to weightlifting. This is like my love. Mm-hmm. She's going to know which therapist loves to treat prolapse and weightlifters, and she's going to put them with that therapist.
Nice. And so you said there's one admin, so there's just one person taking phone calls. Because that was something I found really interesting going to the Fort Worth location. And I'm assuming it's at most locations where there's like a door code. There's no one at the front desk. There's no front desk. You walk in, your PT is ready for you. Is that how it's always been? Have you ever had someone at the front desk? Why did you go?
Yeah, we kind of dabbled with it once a few years ago we trialed it at our Dallas clinic. That's usually where we trial things because that's like our oldest, most steady kind of clinic. And it just like didn't really change anything. In fact, she kind of felt slowed down having to come into the office and stuff. And it's a huge savings financially to not have to pay someone to sit at the desk at every single clinic all day long. And so it's kind of how it's pretty much always been. We've varied a little bit, tried different things, but I would say for the most part, yeah, we just have their virtual. I mean, they're local to DFW because we also do a lot of team things and get-togethers and stuff like that. But they work from home and they manage, or they are the admin for a few clinics. Yeah.
So it's not a VA from the Philippines.
No. Okay. No, one of them's my mom, actually.
Nice. And so obviously with the scaling and continuing to grow, what does that future vision for Genesis look like? You've talked about that big vision, right? Mm-hmm. Changing pelvic health. But as you continue to expand even outside of DFW, obviously in Colorado, what is the goal over the next, to go traction 10-3 and 1 year vision?
Absolutely. Well, big vision, we want to be known as the ones who are leading the field of pelvic health. And so in order to do that, there's a couple routes. We're open to having multiple clinics across the nation, the world, whatever. But also what I'm kind of loving the idea of is instead of necessarily opening all these brick and mortars and having to manage like all of these teams and directors and all this stuff, I almost love the idea of kind of, and I don't even know what the legal terminology is, like certifying our method both for treatment, but also how we run clinics and manage and lead our teams, because that's a whole thing too. We're different in that aspect as well. And so I almost love the idea of making like, you can be certified or whatever in the Genesis way, and
Mhm.
you can, run your clinic that way, but
Interesting.
it's not necessarily, I don't have to be opening a brick and mortar there. And it doesn't
Yeah,
have to
the
be called a Genesis PT and
the
wellness.
sign
It's,
on the door is not Genesis,
yeah,
but
like it can be, I would hope it holds enough clout if they say we're trained in the Genesis way.
okay. So almost creating, there's a pediatric chiropractor, Tony Ebel. He's created like the pediatric experience where it's all his training. And I'm not familiar. I'm not a pediatric chiropractor, so if someone's listening, I'm butchering this. I apologize. But they have, so they're called like PX, and then they have the PX directory. So people that find him that aren't chiropractors, and they're like, I want to. And so he has them train them. They're certified. They get placed under the directory. That sounds similar to where you're
Yeah,
going.
and
Really
it's,
cool.
and it's like I want clinicians and patients and referring like provider sources to see like this pelvic floor clinic, they're mentioning that they're trained in the Genesis way. I'm just calling it that, but it's like that to me means I'm going to send people there because that's elite. That's the best of the best. Like they are solid and trustworthy. And I think we'll be able to reach more patients that way rather than trying to open a million brick and mortars across the nation. Again, I'm not opposed to more brick and mortars, but I think that's slower.
For sure. And it could almost, I only think of certain franchises in the chiropractic space, but it can almost start to water down where you're just chasing 1,000 clinics. And now
Exactly.
it's like, we're just doing it for the number. Cool.
Exactly. And it's like, where's the quality control? Are they really going to understand the culture at that size? Maybe I could, if anyone could do it, I could do it. But it just sounds like a lot of work. And I'm like, what if we just make a method or a certification that they can just be a member of and, have all this value given to them while they're a member, every month, every quarter, every year, whatever it is.
It's incredible. And I'm assuming you wouldn't have that ability to really see that future forward vision if you were still the one creating the SOPs and all of that.
Heck to the no.
And so when did you notice almost like time and time again, like when you is there a time when Dr. Becky tries to go into the SOPs and tries to go into that and then things start to slow down or get messed up?
Yes, it happens too much. Too much, okay? Yeah, because I'm a helper. I want to be helpful and I kind of grapple with this, like the story I tell myself is if I'm not in the thick of it, then I'm this mean boss that's out here, frolicking in the clouds and having so much fun and doing podcasts and stuff like this while everyone's having to work. Oh my gosh. And so I like feel bad and then I end up coming back in. The reality is they like that work. So I'm picturing it as like this awful, they're stuck in the SOPs and I got to help them. Corey's like, we like the SOPs, Becky. Like this is what lights us up. We like creating order out of the chaos that is your brain. And so absolutely, I boomerang back and forth. I literally so we just got back from the EOS conference actually last week, I think. And my brain was exploding because we had never been to the conference and I was just hearing story after story from these visionaries who do the same dang thing. We just meddle, we put our hand back in the weeds and we're like, oh, I can just move this chest piece or whatever. And it like cracks everything. And so Corey's like, let me do it. And so, yeah, the answer is yes, I absolutely do.
That's awesome. Was it difficult? You mentioned earlier that you were seeing patients Monday through Saturday. When did you start stepping back and scaling away? And what was that like mentally, just from founder to founder?
Yeah, I did it about 2 to 3 years in, somewhere in that window. And it was because I had hired my first business coach. I never had a coach up until then. And I finally was like, I need to like maybe hire a coach, like what are we going to do next? Because where I had gone to a retreat actually for female CEOs and I just like went to this thing. This was the first thing like that I'd ever been to and like so many light bulb moments. And I actually met my then future business coach at the retreat and hired her there and everything. And so she was the one who she's a mental health provider but had done something similar with multiple clinics, large teams, stepped away from the day to day, became more of this thought leader in the space. And so she was kind of like, see that for you. And if you want that, let me help you get there. So that was my first experience with the business coach, but it was centered around helping me get out of the weeds and make a bigger impact. And that's actually where I have a course that's for clinicians that teaches them part of my treatment method. And so that's what she helped me build in the first place, and then scale some other things from there. But in order to do all that, she was like, girl, you have got to get out of the treatment all week long. And it was hard. I was, revenue dipped because I cut my treatment in, I think, half. And I am not a finance girly, so I just didn't even think about that. I was like, sure, I'll stop treating half the time. So we had to like rebound from that. And there's just a lot of figuring it out. But it was hard because I felt bad. I was like, but I need to help more people, and I couldn't quite grasp that I'm going to help more people scaling into this visionary seat than just trying to treat all the people myself. I just couldn't see it yet, So thankfully I had a coach that was like, do it, get out, and I listened to her, and I'm so glad I did.
That's awesome. And so that guilt eventually went away, and now you're helping thousands of people on a daily, which is incredible.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. And then when did you start implementing EOS? I'm assuming you weren't day one EOS
No.
tracking it out.
It was, okay, let me think. What is this? April? It was probably a year, almost a year, a little over a year ago now, somewhere in like 10 to 14 months ago. And it was a Corey thing. So she had read Traction and brought it to me and was like, this makes all the sense in the world. This is why we're scrambling like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to run this thing together, like, which we were. But she's like, and at the time, we were already in the process of her becoming like a partner, equity owner and all that stuff. So like, I already knew she was already COO. So like, we already kind of had the positions and titles, quote unquote, in place. And then I had to kind of just trust her and be like, let's try it. Like, I sure as heck don't want to implement this. That sounds like my nightmare. But if you love it and want to try it, I was kind of like, in my head, I was like, it won't work, but we'll try it. And sure enough, here we are almost a year in, or about a year in, and it was a hard year, but the ship, I feel like, has actually turned around, and we're headed out of like the hard of that transition period.
If you don't mind me asking, what has been some of the harder things in implementing it, other than it's a whole new SOP, it's a whole new this and that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think big picture, I've had to change the way I operate, and I've had to honestly respect the systems that Corey's built out and not go around them, because like, as the founder and the owner, like, I can technically do what I want, but I really had to just, such a cliche, trust the process and just try it and be open-minded. And it's just hard because my brain doesn't work that way. I just want to go frolic around and do things off a whim and be like, sure, let's try that. Let's do that. Let's do that. And so it's just, I've had to do a complete 180 in how I operate within my business, which thankfully I am much more now into my true visionary seat.
Mm-hmm.
But in the thick of it, in the middle of it, I did need to come down as we got like our marketing seat on board and our finance seat on board. And like, I had to really help with a lot of that. So it challenged me in places that were not my skill set, honestly. And it was hard and new, and I had to learn how to do something completely different than I've ever done it. So it's just hard.
Yeah. Totally makes tons of sense. With that, I mean, a lot of people listening, including myself, one thing that has kind of been my halt, if you will, from utilizing EOS, what's taught in Traction, is there's this thing in the back of my head. It's like, well, we're a 3-person team. Like, it's me, a tech CA, and an office manager. I'm the visionary, and right now I'm still the integrator and the finance and the marketing. And so, is it? I'm sure it's possible, but like, if you were to think back when you first started 5.5 years ago, what would EOS have looked like then? And do you think that would have propelled you even further to where you are today?
I think it for sure would have saved me a lot of time, confusion, sleepless nights, losses financially. If I had known about it in the beginning, and if I had, even being a visionary, if I had been able to see it and say to myself, this is where we're going as I grow and I hire. I'm going to hire for these seats specifically because I'm going to build myself on this system. Right. And if I would have been on EOS Pure, they call it like truly running on all EOS, like I just gotta say, we probably would have scaled faster, honestly, from the earlier days. Like at this point, I still feel like we've turned the ship around, but now it's like, okay, what does it feel like to have our feet on the ground steady again? Okay. It's like we haven't been in the and now we go yet because we're still kind of recalibrating from diving all into EOS. So I think had we grown with it, it would have saved me so much just hard stuff, but you can't change the past. So,
And for someone listening that might not fully understand, are you able to give like a 2 minute, this is what EOS is?
sure, yeah. So it stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it's essentially an operating system that you can run your business and your team on. It kind of, it stems from, I think it's 6 main parts of a business. I don't know them off the top of my head, but it's, it's like the people, it's like the roles, it's like the data, it's the marketing, and it's like these 6 main things. And it gives you strategy. It gives you direction on processes to build for each of the 6 main parts. It gives you like meeting rhythms and what you're supposed to cover in the meetings. And my favorite thing about this operating system is they're very, very forthcoming on like the why behind it. And the why being, this is what's going to serve the clients and your team the best when everyone's on the same page. And it's very much like people first operation. It's very much like learning about your team and your employees and what is their unique gifting, what are they good at, what are they not good at, do we have roles that we need someone in the company and this person has that skill, can we move them over to that role? So it's very much like people first, team first. And if we take care of our team and if we are all on the same page internally, that's what makes our product or service 1,000 times better because we're all like, rowing in the same direction, operating together, chasing the same big dream for the same reason.
Really cool. And then kind of to wrap up, I know one thing we both wanted to touch on was that collaboration, especially from a chiropractic PT. I know I'm originally from the Northeast, and so there's really no chiropractors in the Northeast, so it's always physical therapy, at least in like my little bubble of Connecticut. But with that, how have you been able to collaborate not just with chiropractors, but so many different professions and specialists? And how has that been powerful for both Genesis, but then also your patients?
Yeah, a big part of helping people get better is looking at the big picture, the holistic picture, right? And I feel like holistic care is such a buzzword right now. It's like, oh yeah, like we're holistic. And I'm like, are you? And so like that's a big piece of it. It's like, what is nervous system, emotional, mental health, gut health, physical health, like, what's happening in all of those areas of this one person in front of me's life. And then it's, putting your ego aside and knowing that I can't do everything, and I'm not good at everything. Like, I don't need to be the one that's trying to do like manipulations all the time on all these people when I have these 4 amazing chiropractors that I'm like, if you would just go see this person, you're going to feel a lot better. Same with like, do I know nutrition-y stuff that will impact pelvic floor and gut? Sure. Can I actually give them the best quality care of that? I'm going to say no. So I think it's putting my ego aside and just understanding that this patient, if we can treat their true holistic picture, and I'm going to do what I'm freaking good at, and I'm going to I actively go out and find the collaborating providers that are so good at what they do. And I'm going to build that network. And that way I know and I trust that this patient is getting the best quality care from all of these providers. And a lot of times people think, well, they're not going to go to 3 other people. I'm going to send them to chiropractic and mental health, and now they're trying to do pelvic floor. Like, they're not going to do it all. And like, who are you to say, first of all, because we don't know them or their life or whatever. But even if they can't do it right then, it's still, in my opinion, our duty to tell them what we believe therapeutically is going to get them better the fastest, right? And they can have autonomy. They can choose where they go or don't go. But it's my duty to say, listen, you're pregnant. I'm seeing you for birth prep. You consistently have this pubic symphysis pain. Like, chiropractor so and so is incredible at treating this. Like, you need to go there, And so it's so like important to just know what providers are just freaking good at like their thing.
Yeah.
And then having your patient's best interest in mind and giving your professional opinion, right? And your professional recommendation, and they can have autonomy and choose. But that's just been a game changer. It started with my chiropractor that I had in my own pregnancy, my second one, and I had never been to a chiropractor. And my midwife sent me. She's like, you have to go, because all of my patients that see, this is Dr. Bree at Uprise Chiropractic in Dallas. She's like, all of my patients that see her have incredible births. And so I was like, I want an incredible birth. So I went, right? And that was like, I didn't even realize I was having SI pain until I like no longer had SI pain. And I was like, I'm like, wow. So I had a personally great experience. And then once I started Genesis, and me and Bree, Dr. Bree, were kind of treating all of my pregnant patients like simultaneously, their births were like incredible, like fast labor, babies falling out of them. Like, they felt so good after. And I'm like, so that was kind of my first taste of like the power of really putting our heads together and our skill sets together, and just knowing like I can't do it all and I shouldn't want to do it all,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Don't want to be playing God, right?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And then just to wrap up, I know you mentioned, I have 2 quick questions. One's kind of just a joke, but are you going to be doing High Rocks in Dallas? I know you did. I saw Houston.
No, don't put me on the record. Probably. I was a little bit traumatized from it, yet I also loved it. My trainer slash coach in general, I've been working with him for 4 years now. He wants us to do it. We did the team relay. And so he's like, let's do it again. So yes, probably.
What parts of the relay did you do?
I did the sled push and the farmer's carry.
Okay.
Yeah.
How was the sled push for the relay? Was it the quote men's weights, or like what?
No, luckily for relay, you do like, so it was me and my husband and then my coach and his wife, right? So 2 guys, 2 gals. Luckily in the relay, you pick your like station and you do that station. You can't swap out in the middle of it. And so like, I'm running over to the sled push, and they obviously see I'm a female and they put me to the female sled. Whereas I know if you're like a duo and it's like a guy girl duo, you have to do the guys. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. So no, I did the female weights, which was I think like 250 sled push and 235-pound kettlebells for farmer's carry.
It's
Yeah.
fun. It's a really fun event. Really
It is fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thought my legs were going to
And then
explode, but I
second
was
one.
like in the middle, I'm like, do I have rhabdo? As I'm like pushing this sled across, I'm like, is this okay? But I made it. I didn't have rhabdo, so
Sometimes it's necessary. You gotta push your limits. You gotta push
exactly.
see what you're made of. And then secondly, I mean, if we were to wrap up, any just lasting impressions you want to leave, and then before you finish that, letting our listeners know where they can find you and connect with you if possible.
Yeah, I would love to. I would say if you could take away a couple things, big picture is if you have a big dream, go for it. And you're never going to be ready. So just do it and figure it out along the way. And as you go, collect your people that are excited about what you're doing and believe in what you're doing, and let them help you, because we can't do it all. And one of my hashtags I use all the time, it's one of our company values, is better together. And we're better together. And so, just go for it. Go for your big dream. You have it for a reason. And find the people who want to be a part of that and help you get there and want to get there together. That has changed everything for me, is building a team that just believes in what we're doing, and find out what you're made of. Like you said on the sled push, you got to push your limits. go find out what you can do because you just might surprise yourself. I know I did. And then, where you can find me, I have my professional Instagram is Dr. Becky Pelvic PT. And so I post a lot of education on there. I post a lot of, whether it's clinical, whether it's business, and then some behind the scenes of my life is on there as well. And then the company Instagram is just Genesis PT Wellness. And so that's, more patient facing education, things like that. And then of course, like our website, genesisptwellness.com has a lot of good stuff. And you can always get my email from there or message me on Instagram. I love when people DM me. It's me. I don't have an assistant in there. It's always me. So would love to just chat if you have any questions or anything.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Dr. Becky.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right. Peace.